I remember sitting in the car park that morning, watching her walk into the building ahead of me. Clicking heels, new blazer, rehearsed confidence. She'd been preparing for this day for months. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that so had I. The difference was, she was preparing to win. I was preparing to let her. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that for 4 years, I was good at my job. Not loud about it, not political about it, just good. I worked in the talent acquisition function of a mid-size financial services firm, 12-person team, one director role sitting vacant at the top. Everyone knew the shortlist had two names on it, mine and hers. Her name was Claire. Claire and I had started within 6 months of each other. We weren't friends. You don't make real friends in competitive environments. But we were professional, civil. I respected her work. I thought she respected mine. For 3 years, that assumption cost me everything. The director role had been discussed internally for about 8 months. My manager, a man I'll call Richard, had told me privately, twice, that I was the stronger candidate, more strategic, better stakeholder relationships, stronger commercial record. I believed him. That was my second mistake. My first mistake was trusting Claire. 18 months earlier, I'd shared something with her that I hadn't shared with anyone else at work. A personal situation. Nothing dramatic, a health issue that had required some time off, fully managed, fully resolved. I told her because she'd asked how I was, because she seemed to genuinely care. She filed it away. I didn't know any of this at the time, of course. What I knew was that somewhere around month 7 of the promotion process, things started to feel different. Meetings I'd normally be included in, I wasn't. A project I was leading quietly had its ownership reassigned, officially due to workload balancing. Richard became harder to reach, shorter in his replies. When I asked directly about the timeline, he said it was still being finalized. Then I got the email. It was from HR. A calendar invite. Informal catch-up. Richard and people partner. If you've worked in corporate long enough, you know what that combination means. I accepted the invite. I said nothing. And that evening, I started paying very close attention. The first thing I found took me about 40 minutes. I'd been copied into an email thread months earlier, one of those chain emails that gets forwarded and forwarded until it's 8 layers deep and nobody checks who's still on it. Buried in the middle was a message from Claire to Richard. She hadn't been careful enough. The email referenced my ongoing health concerns, framed vaguely, just enough to plant doubt. She mentioned she'd noticed I seemed to be struggling lately. She expressed concern. She did it in the tone of someone who cared deeply. It was beautifully constructed. I read it 3 times. Then I forwarded it to my personal email, printed a copy, and put it in a folder. Over the following 2 weeks, I found 2 more. One was a message in a shared project management tool, a comment Claire had left on a piece of my work, framing an error I'd since corrected as a pattern of oversight. The original error was minor. The framing was deliberate. The second was more significant. A colleague, someone I trusted, someone outside the team, told me over lunch that Claire had been having off-the-record conversations with 2 of the senior stakeholders I worked with, expressing concern about my reliability, mentioning that I'd seemed distracted. She had been doing this for months, quietly, professionally, plausibly deniably. By the time I had everything together, the folder had 6 items in it. I didn't go to HR. I didn't confront Richard. I didn't say a word to Claire. Instead, I waited. The promotion decision was due to be announced at the quarterly all-hands. 60 people, the whole firm. Richard presenting the leadership updates. Claire had already been told she'd got it. I know this because she started behaving like someone who'd been told. Small power moves, the way she held herself in rooms, the way she started CCing Richard on things she never used to. I let her have that week. I needed her confident. I needed her standing at the front of that room. The all-hands started at 9. I had been in the building since 7:30. I want you to understand what I did the evening before that meeting, because this is where it matters. I had sent one email to Diane, the people partner, a single attachment, 6 documents, no commentary, just a note that said, I think the leadership team should see these before tomorrow. I leave it entirely in your hands. I didn't know what she would do with them. I told myself that was true. Richard opened the all hands at 9:02. Commercial updates, pipeline numbers, a slide about the new office refurbishment nobody asked for. Then he got to the leadership announcements. I'm pleased to confirm that following a thorough internal process, he paused, adjusted his tie. Claire will be stepping into the Director of Talent Acquisition role, effective immediately. Applause. 60 pairs of hands. Claire stood, blazer, heels. The smile she had been practicing in the mirror for weeks. I could tell it was practiced because it didn't quite reach her eyes. I sat in the third row, said nothing, clapped twice. She walked to the front of the room. She thanked the team. She thanked Richard, glowing about Richard, the man who had already privately told me she deserved it more. She talked about her vision for the function. Talent strategy, pipeline innovation, employer brand, 4 minutes of polished, rehearsed corporate theater. And then, right at the end, she said something I will remember for the rest of my life. I've always believed that in this industry, reliability and consistency are what separate the truly exceptional from the merely competent. She let that land, looked slowly around the room. I looked at Diane. Diane was already looking at me. She gave the smallest nod I have ever seen. What happened next took 11 seconds. I counted. The presentation slide behind Claire, Richard's slide, the one with her name and her new title in large clean font, flickered and disappeared, replaced by an email, Claire's email, to Richard, dated 14 months earlier, every word visible on a screen 4 feet wide, in a room of 60 people. I've noticed some ongoing concerns about her reliability that I think the panel should be aware of before any final decision is made. The room went completely still. I watched Claire's face. I watched the exact moment her brain caught up with her eyes. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. The color drained from her face so completely, it was like watching someone pull a plug. What? She said. Just that. One word. Then louder. The polish cracking. The rehearsed confidence dissolving in real time in front of 60 colleagues. What is this? How is this on the screen? Who put this here? Someone needs to take this down right now. Is this a joke? She turned to the IT manager at the side of the room. A young guy named Paul, who looked like he genuinely wanted to be absorbed into the wall. He was already at his laptop, clicking frantically. The screen didn't change. The second email loaded. Richard had gone the color of old brick. I mean that precisely. Not red, not pink, but the deep, mottled, uneven flush of a man who understands in a single moment exactly how exposed he is. His hand went to his collar. He looked at the screen, looked at Claire, looked at the 60 faces looking back at him. He said nothing. There was nothing to say. Claire had stopped asking who put it there. She was just staring at the screen, at her own words, in her own name, in front of everyone she had ever wanted to impress. I stood up quietly, picked up my coffee, and walked out of the room. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Claire was escorted from the building by 2 o'clock that afternoon. Richard followed 3 months later, quietly, a mutual agreement, no announcement. Diane called me personally that evening. She apologized. I told her there was nothing to apologize for. She had handled it exactly right. I had already accepted an offer elsewhere by then. Better title, better firm, considerably better salary. I handed in my notice the following Tuesday. I didn't organize a leaving collection for Claire. Nobody did. People ask me if I feel guilty about how public it was. I don't. She chose the room. She chose the speech. She chose the words. Reliability, consistency, standing on a stage she built out of my reputation. I just made sure the stage had a trap door. She needed me gone. I just made sure she left first.